Hello, everyone. The RPG Pundit here, and this is another issue of the RPG Pundit Encounter. As you guys know, I have no intro sequence because I don't know how to make one, and I'm going to be chatting with you guys for a little while we wait for some people to come in. I'm sure that there's it always happens. It takes about 15 minutes for people to start showing up. I'm going to do a post on Twitter, actually, just to remind people that we are now live. There we go. No, I've never, ever done an intro. that would go against my whole lo-fi style, you know. It just doesn't appeal to me. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm sure most of you who are in the northern hemisphere are getting some kind of nice weather, I hope. That is correct. No thrill video is exactly my shtick. And over here, meanwhile, the winter has come early, very early, and it is colder than a witch's teat. My cat is somewhere. Oh, yeah, she's. My cat has this habit of standing to the other side of my my bag and then trying to assault me by surprise. And she's currently doing that. She kind of lets herself. She ends up revealing herself because I can only see her little eyes peeking from behind the table. But hopefully, eventually, I'll get her over here and maybe you guys can see her. Rain this morning, but it is sunny now. Well, that's nice. We've had some autumn storms, I guess you could say. Well, I suspect Australia doesn't get as cold as Uruguay does, but I guess it might depend where in Australia because it's pretty big. But here it never gets below freezing, but it can get very close to freezing. That's not great in a country where almost all houses have no insulation to speak of, you know. But there are other ways to make do. As usual, guys, this live stream is not being monetized while it's live. So we welcome any and all super chats. Unlike some other channels where you have to do a super chat for me to list you. Hey, look who's here. Ha! Domino. Unlike those other channels, I will, if you got an interesting comment, I will say, look at this. Look at this violence. Just pure violence. What the hell? You just show up. This is how I know this is part of your love language, Domino, but really. Ryan isn't muted. It's just that we're not starting the interview. He's welcome to say hello. You can say hello.
I'm here. Hi, everybody. Good to see everyone tonight.
Can you guys hear both of us okay? Let me know. Anyway, what was I? Oh, yeah. You're welcome to do super chats. If you've got an interesting comment, I'll probably post it either way. But if you do a super chat, I will definitely post it. As long as it won't get me banned from YouTube or something like that. And money goes to the Domino Cat Toy Fund.
What's her favorite?
Although honestly, some of it now goes to the Domino Kibble Fund. She's eating me out of house and home. I used to be like a very, I've had cats all my life, right? And I used to be very laissez-faire about it, right? Like I'd feed them your most basic cat food and stuff like that, right? And now I'm a softie in my old age, and so I figure like the finest quality, pure protein cat food, and it costs a goddamn fortune. Oh, that's interesting.
That's what I was.
I was having trouble hearing Ryan, but according to Dying Breed Tabletop, I don't know if everyone else agrees. It sounds like Ryan might be at a higher volume level than.
Yeah, when we were talking behind the scenes, I thought I was coming in a little hot, but you said that it wasn't. So I brought it down a little bit. Hopefully that'll help. Okay. I don't want to blow out anybody out there, unless pretty lady.
Well, I can hear you okay now, right? Like,
okay.
I mean, it's not a particularly high volume, but I can make out everything you're saying. So, all right, good. Well, we'll leave it like that.
Okie doke.
Where are we at now? 5 minutes. We're going to give another 5 or 10 minutes here for more people to come in. We've got 18 now. That's not bad. If any of you guys have interesting news that I might have missed today in the RPG realm, you can feel free to suggest it. We're going to be talking a little bit about the nonsense going on at Wizards of the Coast. And obviously, I'm going to be interviewing Ryan in general about what he's up to and what he's doing. So
Wizards never fails to provide for us.
Yeah. While I've got you guys here, the description of the video is going to have all of my links to all my products there if you're looking to check out what I've got. And right now, the current issue of the Pundit Files is Pundit Files number 10, which is the Jousting rules. I was supposed to load up number 11, but I forgot. So my publisher's going to be a little miffed at that. And that is a great source book because it's first of all, it's like 30 pages long, and second, it has not only complete rules for how to handle jousts, both from the early medieval period, the high medieval period, and the late medieval period, but also the second part of that PDF is a very detailed guide on horses that was done by the Mad Hermit, who is in real life an expert on horses. And it is probably one of the best RPG books you could find about, how to RP horses, okay, or how to include them, how to give them some personality, right? Almost every D&D party is riding around on horses, and it's very rare for them to have any kind of personality. DLSD asks, hey, Pundit, why Uruguay cost of living family seems very random. Well, I've been living here now for the most part for like 23 years now. And I had been traveling all over the world. I was one of the earliest digital nomads, you could say. And I found like a lot of places that were interesting places. And as I was traveling, I was kind of getting the idea I didn't want to stick around in Canada anymore because I kind of saw where things were getting to. But some of these places were too expensive, right? Like I lived in Paris, I lived in London, and obviously those would have been too expensive to live at. And when I was in Uruguay, I mean, I'd gone to Argentina also, to Buenos Aires, but it was a real wreck back then. And I'd gone to Uruguay, and Uruguay is not as interesting a country to visit as Argentina, but it is a much nicer country to live in, right? And as I was looking around at it, right, first of all, I had a big RPG community and other interests of mine that I could, be involved in. I spoke fluent Spanish, so, well, back then I would say semi-fluent, but better than most people. And I finally said, well, yeah, okay. I mean, the economy is good, right? Like in terms of the cost of living, for sure. So I decided to stay for a couple of years, and then those couple of years turned into forever, I guess. That's how I ended up here. What are we at? 22 people now. All right. Yeah, Domino's very funny because she'll, like, as you guys saw, she'll run up to me and then start attacking, and then like 30 seconds later, like she is right now, she'll just curl up on my lap and want to be cuddled, you know. Hey, it's Amazing Game Pro. Hello. Well, we've got a pretty good build up here, so I suppose we could start doing this. So for those of you who know me and have been watching me for a long time, you know that before I did the RPG Pundit encounter, I was in a collaborative talk show on YouTube that I had invented. Right, it was called Inappropriate Characters. It had the original cast was, well, myself and Venger Satanis, and then the third person ended up changing over the years, right? And Ryan was the last of the replacement third, right? that we're always cycling through. And then, of course, he ended up.
Okay, you had to get me.
Yeah. And after Venger declared that he was going to stop writing RPGs and he was just retiring from RPGs forever, we canceled Inappropriate Characters because I figured that without Venger there, it wasn't going to be the same. And of course, 2 weeks later, Venger changed his mind and he said he's going to keep doing RPG stuff, right? But by then it was a bit too late, I think, for Inappropriate Characters. But Ryan took it over and did another version of it for a while. Anyways, this is basically a mini reunion, you could say, of the Inappropriate Characters.
We just need Venger to show up for 20 minutes and then go to bed, and then he
could show up on the chat at least. You'd think, but well. All right, so this for those of you also who are watching this the first time because Ryan brought you here. This is a kind of a long form interview format where I ask a series of questions. And the audience is also welcome to present questions for either myself or Ryan. And we also have a tradition here. There are 2 questions that are always the same for everybody who gets interviewed here. The first question and the last question are always the same question for everyone. So Ryan, you've been YouTubing before, well, not anymore, but you've been podcasting in general. About RPGs for quite some time. You've done some projects in RPGs. You've been a fairly outspoken social media guy relating to RPGs. The first question is, who has been good to you and who has been bad to you? This is your opportunity to praise people who have served you well and to call out the people that you that have been thorns in your side.
I'm in my baby face stage of my career now, so let me start with the folks that have been good to me. Obviously, present company, Inappropriate Characters was a big deal. We had Nerd Cognito is, holy smokes, going on 7 years. It was an audio only podcast. And that podcast, when we started it, I would have died on the hill that it was only ever going to be audio. I wasn't going to do YouTube, wasn't going to do video, wasn't going to go deep in the weeds in social media. And after some time, we realized that you have to do social media for promotion and started to get into some of the communities online. And I got my arm twisted by a buddy of mine, you know, T-shirted historian. Mm-hmm. And he said, you got to come on. You got to come on. And then coming on every once in a while turned into a regular spot on one of his shows, and things went from there. So I credit sort of the pivot into video for him and Grim Jim. Jim's a very good friend of mine that was also on that show that sort of twisted my arm and pushed me into that direction. Since then, generally speaking, and I don't like the word community because it has so much baggage with it now, but we do have a community in our section of the hobby. Almost everybody has been really, really good to Nerd Cognito. There are a handful of detractors that are never going to go away, and I know that, but that's okay because they just don't get it. The other folks that have been really instrumental in sort of allowing our push to happen, Bill Sylvie, the Dungeon Delver, is a big ally. Through the show, I've become pretty decent friends with another villain in the RPG scene that's really a pretty decent guy. Now, he and I are never going to politically align, but Daniel Fox of Zweihander, yeah, how about that? All right. I'll sit down, play a game with him, have a beer with him. We're never going to vote the same way in the box, so we just avoid that. I don't really have, one person that sort of championed me. I tried to be friendly and workable with just about everybody because I realized one thing. When we, as old school OSR classic gamers, get together, we're generally more right-leaning and conservative. We generally appreciate traditional values. We like a certain style of game. And unfortunately, that just goes against modern gaming. Here's the thing. The leftists and the modern gamers absolutely are stalwart in their beliefs, and they will rip each other to shreds behind the scenes, but they will stand up to the enemy, which is us, in a solid shield wall. And our side of the hobby doesn't have it. So I've had to temper myself over the years because whether we get along or we don't get along, if we're in the same vein of preserving the hobby as we know and love it, we have to sort of get along. The detractors, again, I'm sort of in my baby face arc here. I'm not looking to start a fire or pour gasoline on the fire of some insane folks, but they're out there for sure. It's one of the reasons why we are exclusively video streaming and producing on Rumble, right? There was an incident with some brigading that happened, and we don't have a home on YouTube. I'm being very tiptoey around this. But again, even though I know that this brigade was started from folks that we would see as brothers in arms on the side of the hobby that we're at, they chose to go sort of that radical left route with us. And done with. Thank goodness our audience and our friends were strong enough to follow us, and we had a place to go. And that's where we landed, was on Rumble. So yeah, I've got people that I could laundry list here, but it doesn't do any good at this point. So when did you ever think I was going to take the high road?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I was really hoping, because so many of my guests have been like, oh yeah, this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy are all great. I don't want to talk about the ones who weren't,
Right.
And it's often a question that ends up only being half filled, but that's okay. So it sounds like you're doing well in Rumble.
We're doing exceptionally well in Rumble. Rumble's a totally different animal versus YouTube in that the metrics and what you're shooting for are very different. In YouTube, subscription is king, right? The number of subs means the world. For us, what I've found on Rumble is we are a destination stream. We are a destination show. Subscribers don't match up with our viewership on Rumble. And then there's the podcast in and of itself. which is doing tremendous. When we were doing Inappropriate Characters, we averaged about 1,000 downloads. We cracked 7,000 at the end of 2025. And we were one of the top 25 podcasts, not just in gaming, but on Spotify in general. We won one of the Spotify awards last year. So great. Things are going very, very well. Again, the audio show is still the audio show, and video is sort of like a secondary metric for us. But Nerd Cognito has gone strong. We're running into year number 7, and we have never missed a week. So if you're looking for somewhere to tune in and listen while you're driving to work, or if you're at the gym or walking the dog and you want something in your ears on your device that is not specifically video format, there is video version of the show now. But we welcome you to find us. Go to Spotify. That's our partner now. That was another big deal. Prior to last year, Spotify partnered with us to bring us into their platform formally. But we're still available on every major podcast provider. And if you want video, the video's on Spotify and Rumble. We also have a live stream that is exclusive to Rumble on Saturdays. That's a little less format. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later in your other questions. But okay. No, Rumble has treated us very well. When we were unceremoniously forced to part ways with YouTube, we were inches away from full monetization. We had the supers and that sort of thing. We know that YouTube video ad revenue, no one's going to get famous or rich from it. We out earn probably 4-to-1 versus what we would on YouTube, which was a tremendous pivot for us. Rumble's starting to shake some of the political stigma and becoming a better alternative. There's still not a full secondary alternative platform, but it's getting there. And again, you know, beggars can't be choosers. It's where I'm at. It's where I have to be. So I have to embrace it. The question's always asked, would you go back to YouTube? I honestly don't know at this point. I really don't. So I'm quite content focusing the efforts for video in the Rumble channel. And obviously the audio show is doing spectacularly. We're still experiencing levels of growth that I would have never believed, because episode 1 we had 3 listeners and 2 of them were me and my partner. So it's just really humbling and tremendous to see where we're at. We're glad that we can generally be self-sustaining, and we don't look at it as a lottery ticket like a lot of content creators do. We do it because we love the hobby. We make $0.0 that go into our pocket. Every dollar that we earn goes right back into the show. And that's how I want to keep it, because we started it for love of all things nerd culture and tabletop role-playing games. And I want to end it for love of all things nerd culture and tabletop role-playing games, whenever that may be.
Yeah, well, I can certainly believe what you're saying about Rumble regarding that the subscriber count won't be as linked to the view count because of my own experience, which is that I have never subscribed to anything on Rumble, but I do watch videos on Rumble when somebody advertises it and it's interesting, right?
Right.
So I can see that difference, and now after this having turned into an infomercial for Rumble, I don't know if I'll even be able to monetize this after I'm done the live stream. So guys, help us out with some super chats here, because I suspect I'm not going to make any money from this interview.
I didn't want to make it an ad, and I don't want to make it an ad for Rumble, but the fact of the matter is it's where we're welcome and where we're at. So you know, if people want to see us, that's where they have to go. And the destination thing is very true. Most of our friends that tune in or come to our live streams only visit Rumble for that show, and everything else is YouTube. And I understand and get that part of the game. It's a double-edged sword, right? So tough. They're not they're never going to be, in the state that they're in, a direct YouTube competitor, because there are a lot of places where they miss the mark. The funny thing is, before we went there, we had made a conscious decision that we were not going to continue to put content on Rumble because of some of those lagging behind steps. And then we had no choice. And that's where we landed.
Well, that sometimes happens, doesn't it?
Yep.
So let's see here. Well, I'm not sure how many of the people that are here right now are people that were brought in by you or people that don't know you at all. So if you want, you could give us a bit of your background in, RPGs, right? Like,
sure.
How, what's your story regarding RPGs?
I see a lot of familiar names in the chat, so I want to shout out to all of you. Thanks for coming on over. For those that don't know, RPGs have been, we've all had interesting lives with different twists and turns. And when I go back and think about some of the consistent sort of rock solid areas of my life, our RPGs is definitely at the top of the list. When I was a kid in the early 80s, there was the group of the cooler, older teenagers, and they lived down the street, and they did this weird thing every Saturday night. They got together and they played Dungeons and Dragons. And I really wanted to know what that was. I was an avid reader. I loved fantasy. I loved science fiction, all of those nerdy things. And I wanted to know what this was all about. So after no small amount of pestering and pleading, they finally invited me to come and sit with them. Now, I wasn't there to play. Maybe you can roll some dice later on. But eventually, I got a chance to play with them. And from that first moment, I was hooked. Since then, I branched out. I became the teenager, worked with my own groups, started to play, did all of those young teenage stupid D&D things. Yes, I created that character that had the +4 Vorpal sword and did all of the stuff that we did. We went through all of the modules in AD&D, and then we pivoted into 2nd edition because that was where the system was at that time. Still loved it. It was a cornerstone for a creative outlet and an outlet to share some time with friends for me during those years. And it just stuck, right? I've always run games. I've always done things in the gaming area. In the early 2000s, I had moved to Jersey at that point, and Jersey didn't have, the area that I was in did not have a large or a present gaming community. So I don't know if you remember the old site Meetup. I ran the Meetup site for South Jersey, and it was one of those things where if you needed a group, if you were looking for folks to play with, it was an outlet that you could reach out to and find like-minded people. Still continuing to play. And then I look at the weird turns in my life. I've divorced a couple of times and had some not so great moments. But it was through those not so great moments and playing with my friends and having that group and having this core bond with these guys that got me through some of the stuff that's not always so pleasant. And that's why I can wholeheartedly say, when I look back at tabletop role-playing in particular, it was one of the few things that was stable and consistent for me in all of the ups and downs that we all travel through our lives. And that's why it became so important to me. Fast forward to 2018, 2019, there was a lot of, I thought, disrespect being paid to folks that appreciated a more traditional style of gaming. We were also starting to see, this was pre-COVID, pre-Critical Role, but we were starting to see the camel's nose coming under the tent for a lot of folks that are using the game for motivation other than just love of the game. They want to advance a political agenda. They want to advance a socioeconomic agenda, and they're using this to drive a market. And that just didn't sit well with me. My buddy Mike and I were talking about it, and he said, you know, Ryan, you're good at this stuff. You worked for a television production company. You worked for radio in the past. Why don't we do a podcast? And then there's a voice that is a counter position for what we're getting rammed down our throats. And that's how Nerd Cognito was born. COVID happened.
And you do have a good radio voice, I have to say. You know, I sound like a slightly throaty Jordan Peterson by comparison, you know. But you've got a good disc jockey voice, yeah.
Well, that was one of the things that I considered doing, right? And I was actually originally a double major. At this time, when I was in college for my undergraduate, I was working full-time for a television production company. And my boss, I was ready to quit. I was like, this is going to be it. This is my life. I'm ready to go all in this career path. And my boss said, our business is so incredibly volatile. The minute you quit school, I will fire you. And I'm glad he did. As you know, sophomore year, junior year came on, I was looking at radio, which was going to be my fallback at that time, and radio was starting to die. Right, we're at the end of the 90s, and the writing was on the wall. I didn't want to be a jock that bounced around from city to city to city every 18 months until the business eventually ate itself. Yeah. So I dropped that. I finished my other degree. Sure as shit, the television production eventually came to an end, and I was sort of left like, what the hell am I going to do here? And that started a whole different career path for me. I've worn many hats professionally since I came to be, and all of them I sort of have brought to form who I am today, and I appreciate that.
Very good. So we've got a question here. Yep. From DLSD25. Said, Ryan, you're still a 13th age guy mainly, right?
I'll play anything. Here's why I am a big fan of first edition 13th age, and I want to clarify that because second edition has gone off the rails with the loony left. I like the element. 13th age for me is a great harmonization of advanced, third, and fourth edition. Now, I know what people think about fourth edition, and I'm right there with you. 13th Age was my answer to fourth edition when I was faced with that choice. There are some shining things that have come out of fourth edition. I can't shit on it entirely, but the way that they put their world building together, the system being generally a D20 sort of 3.5 system, with class and race elements and key mechanics that harken all the way back to AD&D. It just was a good blend. I like it. I've run it at my tables. We're not running it right now. I'm not exclusively that system, nor am I married to it, but I will absolutely defend it because when it's stacked up against some of the other options that are out there, for my style of play, that is this older classic gaming mentality, with any system that's presented to you, it just works. It doesn't matter at the end of the day what the system is. It really comes down to the people and the story that you guys are creating together at the table. And I got to be careful with story because I know the audience here. I'm not talking about story gaming. I'm talking about the whole exposition of what we do when we sit down and throw dice.
Fair enough. I got to say, I think you're the first person ever. This is what, episode 22 of the Pundit Encounter? I think you're the first person ever to have said anything about 13th Age, much less a good opinion on it.
That's okay too.
As for my half of the question, well, my perfect system, in a broad sense, is obviously the OSR. In a specific sense, it's the house system that I've used in pretty much all my games, like Baptism of Fire here, or Lion and Dragon, or the Invisible College, et cetera, where, like, the thing about being a game designer is you get to design your perfect system. Now, some people do that, and it turns out their perfect system is really just only perfect for them, right? Especially when you do something that's like not within kind of the lines of an existing structure, right? Like the OSR is, So but when it comes to doing it within a system that people already like, I think that my particular version of the OSR rules is a really good version of it, and it's the version I always wanted to do, So that is my answer to the question. It's the games I write that are my favorite games, obviously.
And they should be if you're writing them, right? There's a lot of people that fall into I'm going to make fistfuls of money by being a game designer, and if it's not what you love and what you want to play, don't do it, right?
Everyone drink and then buy my books. There you go. Thank you, Driving and Dragons. Well, that's the secret, is that, as you had said, YouTube, it's very nice to be monetized on YouTube, but that's not the thing that actually works for me about it. What works for me about it is that every time I do a YouTube video, people get reminded about my books and they buy more of them. Like literally every time I do a video, you can see it because I track it. Some of my publishers let me track the sales, right? And right after the video, there's a bunch of sales, right? So that is the point. That's way more than what I get from the monetization anyway. How are we defining the OSR in this case? A modified retro clone or D20 with old school? Well, technically neither of the two. Obviously, a modified retro clone is part of the OSR. It's what's called the first wave of the OSR. But a game that is a D20 game with old school feel and play by itself, that definition would probably not be enough. It has to fall within the lines of staying inside rules that either were used in old school D&D or rules that fit in a way that they could have been published in the 80s, right?
Right.
And so like my games are definitely not a clone product. They're second and third wave OSR. And they have some mechanics that you don't usually see, right? Like, for example, in my games, when you level up, there's a random system to generate what benefits you get every time you level up in your class, right? But that's actually something that did exist in the old school era, just never was popularized in a big way. And it's something that would fit within the old school concept, right? But what it can't be is just a game that it's actually owing a whole bunch of its mechanics to new school systems and then just says, oh yeah, but we're like, we're retro,
Well, I hate when people do that. I think that you have to have a clear and distinct distinction between the two. Old OSR is a design school first and foremost.
Exactly.
And for a product to fall into that OSR category, it has to tick those boxes. You can have a modern game or a D20 game that gives you those feelings. And this is sort of why we're seeing this classic gaming philosophy. There's a difference. OSR is the design school for the product. Classic gaming is the play style and philosophy that you see at the table. The two can and often do cross over, but they are mutually exclusive and can be islands too. You can't be OSR unless you fulfill the sort of I don't want to say guidelines because, what's an OSR game?
The landmarks. It's the landmarks of the OSR.
Are they interoperable? Do they have the big six? That sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that absolutely is a must is that it has to be broadly compatible with every other OSR product. Right. That's part of what makes the OSR so successful. And I think the majority of people who play more than one OSR game at least, you'll see that they will take books from different OSR designers and use them, right? They'll use adventures from Lamentations of the Flame Princess in their DCC game. They'll use whatever, right? Like that sort of stuff, right? They'll use a lot of my products to put in, let's say, a more medieval authentic element to something in their D&D, in their OSE or whatever, and that is the compatibility is a very big. It's a very big
that's
element
marker, right?
It's a very big element that ends up generating an opportunity there, because if you make a system that's completely different, then you have to just work within that system pretty much, or you have to make massive changes. But when you know that if you're getting an OSR game, you'll be able to use it with the other OSR games you have, then that means that you've got an enormous amount of gaming material that you can tap into at any time when you're running a game.
And there's a contingent of designers that still to this day will slap OSR on a product that does not.
That's absolutely not OSR.
Absolutely not OSR. And it drives me nuts because there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, it has an old school feel to it, but you can't say that it's OSR because there's a distinction.
Yeah.
And when I see that on a product that is clearly and plainly not OSR, that just reeks of this is predatory marketing from this guy. And how am I going to trust and love this game knowing that he or she intentionally did this just to sell books? Mm-hmm. And, again, it's sort of that grassroots feeling that harkens back to why our show started.
Yeah. So Amazing Game Pro has a question here. He says, for a true revolt against Wizards of the Coast, there has to be a general who leads it. Who would you see as the leader of the anti-Wizards of the Coast revolt?
This is tough because we're decentralized, right? OSR and classic gaming, they're in parallel lanes, but there's not, a grand general of the OSR. There's no king of the OSR. There's no front runner. If anything, I see sort of like a co-op of folks that are prominent and solid game designers that are just fed up with where modern gaming is and is going, that have to, again, this is sort of why I tempered a little bit. We have to build bridges. We have to support each other, even when we don't want to, because otherwise there's not going to be a way to stand up. Is there going to be one singular solid person that makes the charge in against Wizards of the Coast? Absolutely not.
No. There isn't. And I mean, recent history has shown that we really don't need a general because Wizards of the Coast has sunk itself, right? Like the 5.5 edition was stunningly bad, right? Like it was, and I don't mean just in a figurative sense. I mean in a commercial sense, right? They sold a pittance,
Right.
They're and you know this from their Amazon rankings. You know this because of the total lack of third-party products. It's been a complete flop for them, and it's because of the people they hired, right?
Right.
So, I mean, obviously there were a lot of YouTubers who had good critical reporting about the bad things Wizards has been doing over the years, right? But it's really just exposing them but really they destroyed themselves, right, with the terrible products that they've been making for at least the last 4 years or so now.
There was a period of time, starting with the whole OGL debacle a couple of years ago, where we could consistently count on Wizards of the Coast putting their foot in their mouth both physically and financially, about every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I remember that time. It was glorious.
It was wonderful for content creators, but those seeds are now providing the fruit or lack thereof that they're seeing. And no matter how they want to spin it or change it, when you look at their financials, they can't hide it, right? They've done some creative stuff with their quarterly and 10K reports that lump Wizards of the Coast and the incomes together. But if you extrapolate out exactly where D&D is, it's been in steady financial decline for them. And they've actually created a structure where Dungeons and Dragons in 2026 and 2027 can be a financial loss, but viewed by Wall Street as a success.
Well, you see this in the YouTube, the Dungeon Tube influencers, right? All the 5th edition influencers are leaving now. They're giving up because it's no longer profitable for them. And sometimes they present this as, all RPG channels are doing, but no, I'm doing just as good as I've ever done, right? Which is, smaller than theirs were, right? I'm no Ginny D or something like that, right? But nothing has changed for me. The problem is they hitch their wagon to Wizards of the Coast,
Right. And we're in the same position. We're consistently and significantly trending up in this time where you're hearing these tales of woe about, no one wants to see this anymore. No one wants to see that anymore.
That nobody wants to have cheerleaders for WotC. Yeah. So Dying Breed Tabletop says, I understand, agree with definitions, but some of your audience are not so discerning. For example, many are calling Shadow Dark an OSR game. It is not. Well, I have to differ with that a bit because, see, before there was Shadow Dark, there was Lion and Dragon, right? And in Shadow Dark, they have, for example, Shadow Dark has, you get random abilities every time you level. That's one thing I mentioned here that they also have there. And that's one of a variety of rules that are in Lion and Dragon that are also in Shadow Dark, right? And I'm not saying that it was because of Lion and Dragon necessarily. I can't prove that in any way. But some of these other rules were also in other games, for example, like in the magic system that I use in my Medieval Authentics books are all based on doing a kind of spell check rather than memorization or, the Vancian system, right? But that's not something I invented. But again, Shadow Dark has that too, right? There's a whole bunch, pretty much everything that's in Shadow Dark, apart from the torch rule, is actually in Lion and Dragon also, right? Which is definitely an OSR game. There is an element of it being a hybrid, because part of what Shadow Dark wanted to do was to introduce these OSR ideas that were not in the third-party products of 5th edition to people who were mostly playing 5th edition, right? So you're not totally wrong, Dying Breed, but I would say that it is an OSR game in the sense that for the most part, you can take Shadow Dark stuff and it will be compatible with other OSR games, It's not just an aesthetic element to it. Almost all of its rules come from some part of the old school mechanic,
And I would go a step further and say it totally fulfills that classic gaming feel and definitely can harken back to the OSR. I don't know if I could call it, based on the definition that we put out at the beginning of the show with the earlier question, pure OSR, but it's definitely late gen OSR inspired, right?
Yeah. And it uses a ton of OSR material. Yeah.
Right. There's no doubt that Arcane Library did her homework with a lot of OSR books at her side.
Amazing Game Pro says only 15% of D&D Beyond users use 5.5. Yeah, that is a disaster for Wizards, right?
You want to know the funny thing, Pundit? At my Friday night table right now, I am playing 5.5 so that I can say that I have.
Well, then here's a question for you, Ryan. I've also delved into it, though, but now that you're actively giving it a go, what's the worst mechanical change 5.5 made?
I don't know that it's specifically a mechanic. It is the overall design of the game. 5.5 has shifted Dungeons and Dragons away from being fantasy role-playing and into the category of being a superheroes game. That's my biggest beef with it. Now, I had one of my players that was a lifelong player for 30 years come to me and say, I finally want to try giving this DM thing a go. And I said, fine, because I'm forever DM, right? I haven't had a break. I said, let's do it. What are you going to run? You want to run second edition? You want to run Castles and Crusades? No. I'm going to run the new D&D. And I said, oh, I tried to talk him out of it at first. He said, no, well, this is what we're doing. And I said, you know what? For me to be intellectually honest, I'll do it. I'm going to give it a go and see where it leads me. And that way I can talk from experience about how abysmal some of the things are. The interesting thing about this is it really does come back around to the people and the style of play at the table make the game more than the system does. Because
that is always true to some extent. Yeah, you can have a really terrible system, but if everybody is buying into it, they can still make a go of it.
We're doing the best we can with what we have. We're still going to get together, and we don't want it to compromise our fun on Friday nights. Now, I will bust his chops left and right about his system choice, and every week that we come back in, it's something new at the top of the session. Hey, guys, it used to be like this, but I'm putting this in, and the stuff that he's adding to the pot and removing are all OSR based things, right? So at this point, it's a homebrew at best with a 5.5 skeleton. I don't know. The philosophy behind it is terrible. I was a first level character. I did like 40 points of damage in one round. That shouldn't happen. Yeah. It takes away the fun. I'm not there. 10-year-old me with my +4 sword, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Now, as an old man, I want to have a different experience at the table. I don't want to play with cheat codes on. And that's how I feel when I'm at that table.
I can say, I don't know if all of you guys are aware, but I helped make 5th edition D&D. And I brag about that every once in a while. And I can tell you, right, that when we were making the game, right, it was me and Mike Merles interchanging hundreds of emails about every little detail of, the character classes, the basic mechanics, conditions, all this sort of stuff. And our whole purpose was to make it as simple as possible so it would be good for the casual gamer, right? And when you look at what 5.5 made, apart from tweaking a few spells or things like that, right? Everything else that they've now added onto the system were almost all of them, to a man, were ideas that we had floated and rejected because they would add that mechanical complexity that was going to be bad for casual gaming, right? So they the people, obviously none of the same people made 5.5 who were in 5.0, right? Well, I guess Crawford was there, but at the time that he did 5.0, he wasn't really.
He wasn't the figure
in the vanguard of the people who were designing it, right? And so they added in all the stuff that the people who made 5th edition, which was the best-selling D&D edition of all time, had explicitly said, no, let's not do this because it's going to screw it up, right? My 5.5 makes an excellent jumbo-sized coaster. Well, I guess that's at least you're putting it to some use. That's good, I guess. Eric Carson says, with respect to whether something is OSR, I like something that the pundit said, that the litmus test is whether you can use it with other OSR products. Exactly. You can use Shadow Dark to run an OSR module, yeah, or vice versa. A Shadow Dark module can be run with another OSR product. Okay. Driving Dress says drink. Let me catch up here on the comments. We welcome any super chats, obviously, especially since I'm not too sure I'm going to submit this to monetization.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. That's fine. I don't need to monetize every video. Yeah, you could say Shadow Dark is a love child between AD&D and 5th edition. Although it's not, I wouldn't say AD&D, I'd say old school D&D, because there's very little of AD&D in it. I'm glad you're enjoying the episode, Robert. D&D Dad and Son is here, a former guest here. Good to have you. Pundit, looking back, do you think D&D was making D&D more accessible was a win or a loss for the greater hobby, regardless of how well it sold? Well, I still think it was a win, because there was a lengthy decline. We know this now because somebody leaked a whole bunch of the sales figures from like the TSR era all the way up to about 2020. And there was some very serious decline that was going on. And obviously not everybody who got on the 5th edition bandwagon, especially when it became kind of a fad, is going to keep playing. But I am certain that there were people who even at the time were also looking at other RPGs, and who now, after the 5th edition era, are looking at other stuff. Some of whom I know people who started with 5th edition and ended up playing OSR games. So, it is important, as much as it actually benefits me every time that Wizards screws up, me and everybody else in the OSR, for example. But the OSR started to thrive, remember, when 4th edition came out, and 4th edition sucked, right? I thought it was going to be the worst edition ever. I was wrong. But because 5.5 is sold way worse than 4th edition. When that was happening, the OSR started to boom, right? And so every time that the main flagship of RPGs is doing badly, the indies become more successful. So it kind of goes against my own interests, but I also believe that it's important for the hobby that the vanguard game of the hobby should be something that attracts a lot of people,
No, I agree with that too. And I think that we're starting to see numbers that support that. With 5th edition bringing a lot of new blood into the hobby, the glow of Dungeons and Dragons on the marquee is starting to wear off, and we're seeing this with the boost of indie market right now. We did a show about it last week for our main podcast, because not only are we seeing it generally in the hobby, but specific to our podcast, our biggest segment of growth is 24 to 35 right now. Mm-hmm. And that says to me that these folks that were brought in this era are now looking to mature into something else. And they're looking at all of the other options and saying, there is a bigger world. So this is definitely a good thing.
Yeah.
We do have to contend with the Sparkle Troll element, but they're easily dismissed and laughed at this point, because I think the pendulum is swinging back from that extreme, hopefully back towards a moderate level where that sort of stuff just isn't going to fly.
Yeah. Well, Surly Old Wolf here says, nerd stuff was better when it was enjoyed by nerds. It's like your favorite band going mainstream. Next thing, they're singing Love Bells. Now, I don't know when you started role-playing, Old Wolf, but I started role-playing. I was about 11 years old. And that was right at the tail end of the original D&D fad, right? Because D&D became a big fad in the early to mid 80s, right? And when I first started playing, there were like all kinds of people who were playing, right? There was punk rockers and heavy metal people and skaters and and football players and whatever, right? So like I often say that 11-year-old me was the nerdiest kid at the table when I started playing, and then about 5 years later, I was the least nerdy person at the table, right? Because the fad had ended, and then you only had the nerds, right? So I think that if that was the time period when you were first gaming, you might have thought that it was always a nerd thing, but it wasn't. There was a time when it had gone pretty mainstream, right? Certainly with people that were kind of more alternative being more into it, but it wasn't something that was exclusive to nerds. And
Right.
Again, I think that it's usually the game, the hobby rather, is better when you have a wide variety of people who are playing it, with the caveat regarding Sparkle Trolls, right? That it's better when the people who are playing it are interested in it as a game, not as something else, not as a fashion statement or as a lifestyle choice or some shit like that, right?
Not therapy.
That is the real problem, right? It's not the regular, the normies who are the problem. It's the theater kids,
Right. I think that poisons the well, and they're a smaller segment, but they have a huge voice, especially in online circles. And that's why there's this perception that this extreme is really the bubble that's in the middle. And I do my best to point out that that's not the case.
Yeah. But they also screwed themselves, right? Because they ended up filling Wizards of the Coast with these useless people, and that's killed it for them,
Right.
And now everything's turning around again, so that's good. Josh Peter says demographics is destiny, so making D&D more accessible is a good idea. Yeah. Is there a tracker on TTRPG as a whole sales to see what the actual figures are in smaller corporate? Well, there is one important tracker. There's actually a couple of important trackers. One is DriveThruRPG sales, right? Another one is Amazon rankings, right? But probably one of the most reliable ones is Kickstarter projects. And I pointed out now that it's been for the last, I guess, 6 years now, that every year OSR projects on Kickstarter have become more and more successful, to the point that now that as of about a year and a half, 2 years ago, they overshadowed third-party D&D products. So there is definitely growth that is still happening there.
And there's growth that's being recognized by the platform itself. Kickstarter just recently finally opened up a dedicated TTRPG push and category and that sort of thing. Before, it was all just sort of lumped in with the other projects that were in gaming. Now Kickstarter has recognized that this growth isn't going away, and they've segmented it out. That was a big tell for me. I got a question for you, Pundit.
Hang on one sec before we go to your question for me. We've got a super chat here, $5 Canadian from Jeff Ramdenkar. He says, what would you say are the best and worst rules and game mechanics you've seen in the current generation of OSR products? Actually, that's not necessarily a question for me. He left it open.
Yeah.
So if you want to take a shot at that, Ryan, you can.
I like traditional initiative. I think that is one of the strongest elements from the OSR, that if you're looking to create or homebrew something for your table, or even make a project and design something of your own. I also, specific mechanics from OSR that would be really, really good is making sure that the game has an inherent mechanical balance, as opposed to like a challenge rating style balance. What am I talking about by that? Look at things like the difference in the XP tables between classes, right? Those are there for a reason. We talk about that a little bit on the show that's going to be coming out on Tuesday. There was a lot of thought put into the nuances of things like, why do wandering monsters appear? It's not just there's an Ankeg roaming around in the forest. It's a management tool for the system. And when you sort of connect the dots between how does this tie to party and resource management in the OSR, that's a sweet game mechanic. Worst rules? I like OSR stuff, so this one's tough. Trying to think of something that stands out to me that I dislike. We could argue sort of the intangible of hit points till the cows come home, but that's just inherent in the fact that it's a game. I don't know that it's necessarily a bad mechanic. It's I was a fan of like wound points versus traditional hit points for a minute there, and that's sort of in flux. Pundit, do you have anything that you would say sticks out as really a bad mechanic?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind in terms of both rules and mechanics, because they kind of come together, is the whole like black hack thing, where you get this. It becomes, first of all, it supposedly it means that you don't have the same. It changes the division between DM and players, and second, it becomes something that is way too simplistic and generic. It misses some of the, and you see there are some other systems too that like they tried to make, because one of the elements of OSR play is that you have sets of sub rules, right, that are going to work different. Like morale doesn't get rolled on a d20, right, and stuff like that, right, or reaction rolls or things like that. And if you go into like making it like everything is the same mechanic, that takes a bit away from OSR. Obviously the best rules are my rules, but that you should have seen that one coming. But I mean, I got inspiration from some very great rule systems, including Lamentations of the Flame Princess, Dungeon Crawl Classics, right? Those are two of my favorite. And all of the kind of Stars Without Number and stuff, all the stuff that was produced by, what's the name of the company?
Crawford.
Yeah. So those were genius, and there are lots of great, there are far more good rules. Well, there probably are. There's probably a lot of really mediocre and bad OSR games, but they never sell anything, right? But the number of successful OSR games that have good rules are much more than the successful ones that somehow became successful in spite of having not that good rules, right? D Dad and Son says, my son's in theater and he's the only straight male student there.
Oh, good. He's going to get a lot of tail.
We have got another super chat here, so you're gonna have to hold that question a little bit longer. Super chat.
I don't even know if I remember what it was.
I sometimes think I'm a sucker, right? Because I watch like Diversity and Dragons, and he'll only answer people's questions if they put a super chat in there, right? But I can't help myself. DLSD sends $5 American, and he says, any tips on getting an indie game above all the noise and oversaturation in the market right now without breaking the bank via paid advertising? Well, this is a tricky question, right? Because my first answer that I'm kind of like drawn to do is say, well, you could be the RPG Pundit, right? So, because I've never advertised in my life. Sometimes some of my publishers do a bit of advertising, but even that is rare, right? And I think that, advertising can be fine in certain contexts, but it is much more important that you first get a name for yourself, you get a presence, right? And then you make very good use of social media, and you have to be a self-promoter, right? I know that some people, including on this chat, will be making quips about my levels of self-promotion, but that is an important part, right? You have to tell everybody why your game is good, show them the game, remind them that the game is there. And a large part of the job after you've written the rule books is to sell them, right? And to sell them through yourself, through your personality, through, social media, YouTube, guest slots and things like that, right? All of that is, I think, the most vital part of it, right? Because I've seen some games, by the way, that were really great games that the person just put it out there and then they never got anywhere because nobody really ended up hearing about it, or very few people did.
Right. So the signal to noise ratio is so high right now that you really have to make the game a personality so that people are interested to see what's between the covers. It's tough right now. I would not want to release a core system. I looked a couple months back because we had a similar question that popped up on Drive-Thru RPG. There are over 23,000 core rule systems.
Yep.
That's a big sea to swim through. So
not all of those are OSR games, but yes.
No, but just generic.
Yeah, and that also means that if you're making a generic RPG, no matter how much you think it's going to be wonderful, you've got to do like massive efforts to be able to get it moving, right?
Right. It is a very daunting task, especially for someone that is just starting out, because not only then do you have to make the game a personality, but you almost have to adopt a personality yourself to market it. Pundit's absolutely right. If people aren't talking about it, it doesn't exist. So you have to talk about it to the point where, yeah, you self-promote it. Well, there's a reason that Pundit holds up his books, not only because he believes that they're good, but he wants to get that awareness out there so that if someone looks at this and says, this is something that could fit into my table, it's up here, and then they can seek it out, because you're up against $1 million budgets in some cases, even for Kickstarters, right?
Yep.
If you look at some of the Kickstarters that are not necessarily Wizards of the Coast, but they are other top tier publishers, there is advertising money there. There is influencer money that they're throwing at people there. And you have to fight against all of that. It's a big uphill battle. That's why I say anybody that writes something deserves some sort of credit. It's a matter of if you can create this persona for the product to have it have this heightened awareness that you need to sort of go with. And that's tough. That's really, really tough.
It can be, yeah. I'm going to add just one more little question here because otherwise I'm going to forget about it. Pundit, I know you've had a long-running DCC campaign. Would you classify DCC as an OSR game? How do you feel about Goodman Games? Well, I have had probably the longest-running DCC campaign game in history. We play every 2 weeks for the last 14-plus years. Now it's over 14 years that we've been playing it. And I think DCC was absolutely brilliant. The core rules of DCC, they showed just what you can do when you end up crafting a system to fit a concept, and within the old school rules, pretty much. I know that there are some bits and bobs of it that are like third edition, like the saving throws and stuff like that. But it is essentially, I would certainly classify it as an OSR game, and I can say that because I've made OSR books that I use with that game, and likewise I've used stuff from that game in the OSR. Now, Goodman Games has become very woke, and so that is the one disadvantage of that, and I wouldn't. It leads me to not want to suggest that people purchase it, unfortunately, because they don't really like you. I would say instead, check out World of the Last Sun, my campaign setting of that campaign, and the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, which is also based on mechanics and weird stuff that I've used, generators and stuff like that I've used for that campaign. And you can use that with any OSR system pretty much. So there we go. All right. So you had a question for me.
I have no idea what it was.
Well, that does happen at our age.
If someone in the chat remembers what we were talking about generically, maybe it'll spark one of the synapses. I've absolutely lost it. So,
well, we've got another question here for both of us. What's your two's take on the lit RPG craze, both in novels and now moving into tabletop gaming?
It's 90% romantasy, so I don't give a shit.
Yeah, it's young adult novel garbage.
Right.
Pundit, how do you feel about the specialist in place of the thief in Lamentations of the Flame Princess? Well, Lamentations of the Flame Princess was my inspiration for my Dark Albion. My Dark Albion campaign started out as a Lamentations campaign. That very quickly we realized it wasn't medieval authentic enough, and we had to change a whole bunch of stuff, and it eventually evolved into Lion and Dragon, right? And obviously in Lion and Dragon, I put the thief class in, right? But in fact, I think the specialist class was very interesting, but it just wasn't. I think that it could have been expanded to be other types of specialists, right? And in fact, in my campaign, rather early on, we had one character who wanted to be like a medieval physician, right? And so we kind of modified the specialist class to fit that particular aspect to it, you know. So I still think, you know, Lamentations, at the time it came out, it was revolutionary, and it had a lot of potential for stuff to be built on top of that, right? If anything, nowadays it looks kind of like not all that radical compared to other products, second and third wave products that came out after it, right? But it was revolutionary at the time.
I think that I'm a very much less is more guy, but specific to the specialist, that could have been broken out. I wanted a independent, very fleshed out thief or rogue. There is such a thing as too generic, right? I always say only be as specific as necessary, and it just didn't cross over the line. So the example that you gave from your campaign fits perfectly. You know, you have someone that, like a plague doctor, you're going to have to fill in a lot of the gaps on your own, which is fine. That's part of what the hobby is. That's what we do at the table. But you could have branched it out a little bit more to have a specific character, because the thief is so, you know, it's an icon in the classes for our hobby.
Well, but I mean, you could run the specialist as a thief, but you could also, in theory, you could replace those with other type of skills or lores or whatever. And
right, you could have a specialist that would be a builder or a blacksmith, and just fill in those gaps as well in Lamentations. I like Lamentations. I'm not bagging on it by any means, but it's one of those areas where I wanted just a little bit more separation. Yeah, certainly. What were we talking about?
I'm not sure. Did he also become a barber? No, he wasn't. He wasn't a surgeon. He was a doctor, right?
Like a plague doctor.
Well, plague doctors are actually post-medieval, but he was you know, in the medieval period. You're quite right, certainly, that surgery was seen as a lesser specialty than being a medical, a physician, right? Which was someone who would prescribe all kinds of apothecarial potions and treatments of other kinds to cure disease, right? Whereas surgery, you know, was usually done by barbers. So yeah. All right. Well, since you haven't remembered your question, I'll move on to my next question. Was if you've got any, you know, apart from your social media stuff, have you got any other projects that you've been working on?
I do. I'm next week. I'm actually going to do the first public play test of a new supplemental game for your table. It is a map making cooperative experience that you start effectively with a blank piece of paper or a poster board, and through the role play and the creation that happens at the table. At the end, you're going to have a chunk of a realm that's fully fleshed out that you can use and drop into a scenario. It's tentatively titled Magister Operis, because that's exactly what everybody at the table is doing. Think of it as a round robin with open-ended story mechanics. Here's a blank slate. Draw something on the map, tell me about it, and then there's a set of companion charts and tables that are going to give you more specific scenarios that the table then talks about and develops the map through that process. It's very, very different, very, very experimental. I fully expect it to fail, but I put a lot of work into it, and I think that people are going to like it once they see it and are able to have their group effectively be world builders within the confines of this structured game. So that's coming soon.
That's interesting.
There's a couple of, I pulled inspiration from board games, tabletop games, and just discussion that happened, and the way that my friends and I sit down. I have one really good friend. His name's Dan. From the time that we were teenagers through today, we could still sit down with, you remember the old sort of procedurally generated books, the central casting books. They had like the dungeon generator and that sort of thing.
Remember that? Yeah.
We would sit down and let's say we were doing a dungeon. As we roll and get what the room is and put it on the map, just through us having a good time sitting around and doing this, we would tell a story and sort of create, think about it like a mini adventure or a tale that goes with it. That was sort of the root of where this came from. And then I looked at what else was out there, because great creators create, exceptional creators steal and make it their own. And I pulled all of these influences, and I've come out with something that you could literally have one session, 3 to 5 hours, and walk away with a chunk of the realm fully fleshed out, including history, lore, tragic events, things that happen, interesting scenarios, all ready to go. And then you take that to your table with your system of choice and move your campaign on from there. So it's not specifically like a core rules system or an adventure. It is a game supplement in the true definition of that.
It's a generator.
Yeah, that's what's coming out. It's a collaborative storytelling, and I don't want to use that word because it's loaded, but that's what it is. A generator that has this framework behind it so that you're guaranteed to have a good finished product at the end of the game.
Well, that sounds very interesting. I'm not sure I would go the story gaming route, but I would probably have used some mechanics or something like that.
There are mechanics, right? Everything that you do is based on mechanics behind the game.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's like when my buddy and I were making the dungeon, there's this mechanical structure that comes in that causes the placement, and then you fill in the story at the table. So that's why I don't like using the term story game, because that's loaded. It is a game that involves structure and building and creativity that also has story layered on top of it.
Mm. So what by that do you mean so that it's basically a world building system?
Yes.
And what you're calling story is actually the factions or groups or kingdoms or the histories of the thing. Yeah, well that is all. That's actually how you create a world. Yeah.
Right. So there you go.
Oh, that sounds good.
I've learned from the master here. I'm not going to say that it is using story. I'm going to say that it is a collaborative world building experience.
Well, I'm going to comment just now that because for those of you who are looking forward to my later projects here, that my upcoming game, Sons of Heaven, which is a science fiction RPG, it's based on the rules of Star Adventure, but it's going to have a complete universe and setting to it that I think you're going to find very interesting. It can be described as the Bronze Age collapse in space, or maybe Bible stories in space, I guess you could say in a way, right? But it's going to be published by Mad Scribe Games, but Mad Scribe has had a couple of setbacks in his personal affairs in the last little while that has slowed down a bit of the production, but I think he's getting back on course now, and I still think it's going to come out sometime within the next 2 months or so, but don't quote me on that exactly. It comes out when it comes out, but I've seen his layout, I've seen his art. It's looking great. I think it's going to do very well. I also heard from Spectre Press that they are planning to, at some point, I don't know when in the year or what have you there, but what their timetable is, because they just talked about it to me recently, to compile the last remaining issues of Pundit Presents into the Gonzo Adventure Companion, right? Because those were all adventures for kind of weird fantasy and Gonzo gaming, with a couple of, mostly adventures with a couple of weird random generators thrown into that was, and once that's done, that's it. Every single issue of the Pundit Presents series has now been put into a compilation volume. So if you guys were waiting for the Gonzo adventures, I guess this is going to be a bit of good news for you. And I'm gonna give you guys a little hint about what I'm actually working on now. I've finished the first draft, and I'm doing the proofreading for it as we speak. Well, not as we speak, but I was doing some of it today, right? And what I'm going to tell you is I'm going to be doing another historical game, but I can't call it a medieval authentic game, because this is I decided to go with a rather obscure subject that many people probably aren't going to care about. It's going to be a game set in Imperial Rome. So there you are. I believe that most men only think about it 2 or 3 times a day. So most men in the Western world, at least. And it's going to be a game that's going to have a specific focus, but you can also ignore that and run it just as, whatever you want to be. If you want to be legionnaires, or if you want to be, in the Roman Senate or something like that, or if you want to just be a gang of thugs and, running around ancient Rome. So it's going to be, I'm not sure if it's going to be 1 book or 2, because if it's going to be 1 book, it's going to be a pretty big book, but we might split it into the mechanics book, or the player's book, or whatever you want to call it, and the world guide. It is going to be set in the crisis of the 3rd century, which is, troublesome times, which makes great adventuring. And it'll have a lot of details, it'll have all the same, all my historian chops have been applied to have it get a lot of detail. You're probably going to, unless you're already kind of a real expert on ancient Rome, especially that period, because a lot of people are more familiar with like the early empire, right? The Julio-Claudians and the 1st century, but the 3rd century is batshit, and it's just an amazing setting, right? And you're going to learn a lot about Rome and Romans and, Roman magic. And, obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff there about Christianity as well, early Christianity. It is going to be a big deal. Now, at the moment, I have not technically secured a publisher, right? I mean, obviously my relationship with Mad Scribe is really good, and he makes really good games that I suspect he might want it, but he might be busy. He might be doing other stuff. I know that he's publishing a book by Rob Kuntz, for example. So we'll have to see. But, if someone really wants to try to pitch me on publishing my book, you can let me know. It's not quite done the proofreading stage yet, but once it is, it'll be, I'm going to start seeing what's what about it. So there you go. You guys heard this first. I dropped a few hints on X. I did a thing about what I'm working on, and I put a picture of the Emperor Aurelian there. But I think some of you suspected what I was going to be doing, but now you know. There you go. This is exclusive to this live stream. You guys have heard it first here. Yes, it's going to be a lot better than Nolan's interpretation of the Odyssey. I hope to God. Now, I hope it's Rome season 1 level. Yeah, that would be great. It's going to be quite good. I'm going to give more details later about like the specific context that I put it into as a campaign, like the default campaign, which I think you guys are going to find to be pretty cool as well. But I'm going to leave that for a future video, perhaps. But right now, I've given away the main thing, which is the setting and time period. So now you know what's coming, and I hope that will be out maybe by the end of the year. I doubt that it'll be out in a matter of months, but it might be out before 2027. So I guess we're gonna see. All right. So moving on now. I was looking to see if there was any RPG news in the last 24 to 48 hours, but there wasn't. But there has been some pretty big RPG news this week. I was stunned because I thought that the days of getting to do videos where I ranted about how stupid Wizards of the Coast were over, right? Like what else could possibly happen? And then suddenly I get 2 videos out of it in 1 week, right? Because
Chris Talks delivered.
yeah, he really did. So the first one was that Wizards of the Coast is having an internal revolt, right? I don't know if you heard this, Ryan, but
I saw your video on it. I haven't seen too much more about it other than the rumors.
So they're trying to unionize. Someone pointed out to me that Jason Tondro, who was with Paizo, he was a significant figure in the unionization of Paizo employees, right?
That doesn't sound
and now he's at Wizards.
Right.
Big coincidence, right? Like it's incredible that you would hire someone that you knew, screwed the company he was in before, right? And then just brought him in thinking, well, nothing's going to happen with us, So it's pretty crazy. But, they've made all kinds of outrageous demands, including that they can never be fired and that they should get to work on their own side projects and use anybody who's worked for a corporation at the creative level knows, right? Like if you're hired by that company, you're on a contract, you cannot do other stuff until that contract is done.
They own it.
They own it. They own your IP if you worked on it while you were there, right? And that's complete, and everybody understands that as being normal, because otherwise you're going to save all your best stuff for your stuff, right? Like it's just common sense, right?
I think that this is more entitlement coming out from, unfortunately, the inmates that we let in to the hobby because we didn't do a good enough job of gatekeeping, because back in the day we saw look at that table over in the corner, and our response, being Gen X, was whatever, they're not bothering us, let them do their thing. Well, now they're the writers, now they're the people that are doing the final art choices, now they're the ones steering the ship, and this is just the inevitable conclusion of it. We want that entitlement. I want you to pay for my software, pay for my time, put food on my table, and I'm going to keep my best work for myself. The
LSD, they are actually trying to unionize. They're trying to follow in Paizo's example. And remember, they're in Washington State, where that would be a huge problem for Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, right? And Hasbro has hired what is apparently a really killer law firm that is
they're union busters,
dedicated to being union busters, right? And there's rumors that they're hiring the Pinkertons too. I'm not sure if that's true or if that's just a joke based on the fact that they hired the Pinkertons in the past to harass some guy that had gotten a set of magic cards too early, right?
They sent it to him and they punished him for it.
Yeah. Michael McLaughlin, $5 super chat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the super chats. And I'm really glad that some of you are contributing. he says, one side lists all their obscure woke pronouns versus the other side who want to charge me a fee every time I roll dice in the privacy of my own home. Yeah, I know. It's a bit of a pox on both their houses, right? But that brings us to the other news that came out, which is that Chris Cox in his earning report call made it very clear that they are basically done with D&D books. They're going to still make some books that are going to be ultra premium books, in other words, very expensive, that are basically going to be coffee table books. They're going to be part of the lifestyle brand moniker, which is exactly what I've been saying for like close to a year now. And there were a whole bunch of people that are like, no, Pundit, that'll never happen. Oh, that's nonsense. You have no proof of this. And I'm like, you saw it coming. That was part of the plan all along with Sigil, right? With their VTT. The only thing is now that doesn't exist, and they're just using D&D Beyond, and it all looks really pathetic, right?
Writing was on the wall. They got rid of every single staff member that had any credible experience with Dead Tree publication.
Yeah.
In their cuts at the end of last year.
Well, it was earlier than that too, because they had a large scale distributor, the type of distributor that gets books out into like, what remains of the big box bookstores and things like that, right? And they just got rid of them. And they claimed, oh, well, we've got this half dozen other tiny distributors that are going to do the work just as well. And that, if you understand anything about publishing, that's complete bullshit, right? That is not going to do it just well. It's going to let them target maybe for gaming stores and things like that. But it's not going to get them into Barnes and Noble,
I had an ownership stake in a gaming store until about 2 years ago. I had someone come by with an offer, and with brick and mortar retail as it is, I took the offer and ran. But prior to that, even these minor distributors, they're not going to cut it for the independent game store.
No, but Wizards doesn't need them to anymore, because they're not going to be mass producing the books. Driving and Dragons, you're absolutely right. That is one of their demands. Their demands is that they shouldn't have to work at the office. They should be able to work from home.
Right. I wish that we could make those sort of demands too. I think that it's ridiculous. I thought the same thing with the Paizo union too. They're not going down a coal mine. They don't have hazardous conditions. There's no need for collective bargaining in what should absolutely be a merit-based system. This is just allowing them to collect a check. This is a survival tactic of their own in a market and with a company that has a shrinking market share.
Yeah, and literally both of those bits of news are connected to each other, right? Because part of the reason why they're doing this now is that all of these people that were hired by Justice Arm and all these people have never played D&D, who are, young adult fiction authors or feminist bloggers or vegan cookbook writers, have realized that they're all about to be fired, right? And they know that the next round of layoffs is going to get rid of all of them because it doesn't actually fit the direction in which D&D is going, right? And that is super clear to them, right? Like when D&D brings back Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman and Ed Greenwood, and they're going to do the Dragonlance TV show, and it's not going to be about paraplegic black lesbians. When all that is happening, they know the writing is on the wall, right? And so suddenly they're going to try to do this as an attempt to prevent it.
Well, they've also the rumors have trickled out. I don't know if you've heard this. The upcoming 6th edition, whenever that may be, there is a huge rumor that is reasonably credible that they are going to be throwing it back to an AD&D or 2nd edition feel for the mechanics. These other folks have no experience with it. They're not gamers. They haven't grown, and they've openly expressed disdain for that style of play.
I've heard that.
I don't know that
I have my doubts about it. I think that might be wishful thinking that someone's come up with.
I have a contact at Wizards that's reached out to me in the early stages of this rumor, and I flat out said, "What's the likelihood of this? Is it better than a coin flip?" And the answer was yes. So I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I don't know.
I've got hardly any. I've got very. There was a time when there were a fuck ton of people at Wizards that were sending me info, right? But most of them are gone now, right?
Yeah.
So I had not heard that. Now, the thing is, though, for example, 5th edition did that, right? 5th edition was an attempt to return to a somewhat more old school style of play, but that didn't mean that we were going to bring back Thaco and negative armor class, right?
Right.
It was nevertheless, it was using some of the principles of old school in the design, right? That's part of why I got hired, right? That, and because I was well known already by that time as a reviewer and therefore a critic of design and of systems, right? I mean, I hope you're right. I mean, I think if what they do is do something that's too old school, that might work against them.
I agree.
If they do something that is in the lines of kind of third wave OSR sort of thing, right, or a hybrid like Shadow Dark, right? That could be very good for them. Yeah. Well, Robert Santon, $2. Thank you so much. Put them back in the closet, he says.
Oh, if only we could, and throw away the key.
Yeah. So, I think it's hilarious. I think that the funniest thing is that there was this massive project, right? Cynthia Williams put it all together. She had this idea. It was going to be $1 billion idea. She was going to go into the VTT. She was going to do the new OGL that was going to remove the competition. Basically, it was going to force everyone inside the VTT, and third-party products would get, they would get commissions from that. It was going to be massive subscriber. The VTT was going to be incredible, right? And if all of that had gone the way they wanted it to, then maybe, just maybe, a subscriber model would work, right? But now every single part of that fell to pieces, and they're still going to try to do it anyways. This is like, you're planning to go to war, except that all your tanks are gone. None of your missiles work, right? You've lost almost all of your generals. Like it's like you're Iran, right? Like it's. Well, you're still saying, "No, this is our plan. We're going to keep going. We will bomb them into oblivion." It's like, no, it's not going to work, dude.
When they promoted Dan Ayub was part of the Williams regime. Cynthia Williams, famously, D&D is under-monetized. The difference now is that Ayub is also a marketing guy, and he is able to continue the internal push while putting on a better public face than Cynthia Williams did.
Yeah, but it's not. But it's not the same, right? Like you were promised, this incredible virtual tabletop, and instead all you're getting is D&D Beyond. Yeah.
Right. And D&D Beyond, as someone that's playing 5.5 right now, atrocious. It is I have a basis in the software industry. It was one of the hats that I wore coming through my career. I actually just retired from the software industry this past November. So I'm officially an old man now.
I guess so.
But when it comes down to promoting this software as a service type, you're leasing Dungeons and Dragons, that's a strategic move that they're putting into place because that's the only revenue stream that they're seeing is feasible. They have a year plus of results on paper that are putting them into the red. So at this point, they don't have much of a choice. And you're going to rent it and you're going to love it. So,
but I mean, there is an existing number of people that use D&D Beyond and are probably going to continue to use it. Fine, but
the UI is terrible.
I don't think it'll create a new wave of people coming in.
No, I don't see it bringing new people in. I see it capitalizing on a segment. So they know that they have this segment of audience that will buy everything that has the letters D&D on it. They also have this segment of players that are comfortable. It's like when you get your streaming service, you have your Netflix. I'm not using it as much. I don't like where they're politically aligned, but it's only $10. If I use it a little bit, it's okay. they have it priced in that it's okay price period where, I forgot to cancel, but it's only $10, so I'm going to use it again. And that captive audience is really what they're going to try to maximize. They know that they have this audience that has no clue what drive-through RPG is. That was my question from before. I remembered it. See, we've come back. But so you use drive-through RPG as a metric. What percent of the hobby in total do you think actually even knows drive-through RPG exists? I posit that it's less than 10%.
Oh, that's very interesting. I don't have figures.
Oh, neither do I.
Yeah.
But you know,
okay, so a lot of the people that play 5th edition, that played 5th editions, they and only play that, they would have no idea, right? They wouldn't look at it that. Now, because they have the DM's Guild, right? That means that anybody who is interested enough, a 5th edition gamer, who is interested enough to purchase third-party products, will probably know about drive-through RPG. Because that's where you can get the third-party products. Okay?
But they have that independent branding of DM's Guild.
That's true.
I think there is a core, what I like to call the everyday gamer. They're not on X. They're not tuned into the forums on the internet. They're not watching Dungeon Tubers on YouTube. They get together with their buddies, drink beer, and play Dungeons and Dragons.
And just like those might well be the majority.
Right.
But they're a vast minority if you look at spending. Okay.
Fair.
That's the difference. The people that are going to spend the most on RPGs will all be aware of drive-through RPG.
I would agree with that statement. But I think there's a huge market segment that has
there's probably a large market segment that doesn't know it exists. Yeah. Sure, that's quite possible. And there's probably some people who go to Kickstarter but don't, because Kickstarter does a lot of stuff.
Right.
So they might see RPG stuff there, but they might not know about drive-through. Right. That is possible. But it is also a massive seller. Right. I sell way more on drive-through than I've ever sold on. Well, my publishers sell way more of my books on drive-through than they do on Amazon or on Lulu or anywhere else they might put it.
Absolutely agree. They are the biggest game in town for independent publishers. Often people lament, why can't we have another marketplace? Because there's no one that can compete with them. I did with Greenhaven, the first book that I publicly released. I had to make that choice. Am I going to diversify or am I going to be exclusive to drive-through? And the numbers for the people that are actually buying, like you said, with the spend, they're there. But I'm just wondering, how big is this uncaptured audience?
Yeah. Well, it is pretty big. But again, this is one of the issues about monetizing D&D, right? That it's maybe like 1/6 of D&D gamers who spend 90% of the money.
Right. Yep. And they've got the socks too. Oh, just taking a look here in the chat. They're going to buy Shadow Dark and slap 6th edition on it.
My Gonzo Fantasy Companion sold 5x on drive-through RPG. Come on, man. It is actually an Electrum bestseller right now.
I got it on the shelf behind me. So,
no, I mean, a lot of people who do post stuff on drive-through, like I said, if all they do is put it up for sale and then forget about it, like there's some small time self-publisher, they might not be making a lot of money at all, right? But if you're a known quantity, that you do really well, actually.
Yep.
I mean, again, I make a full-time living from it, So, all right, we've got another $5 Canadian super chat. I don't know how much that is now. I guess it's like about $1 American. I'm not sure. I've been away from Canada so long that I don't know exactly what the currency exchange is. If you too were leading the development for 6e, what would be the rules you would give the design team on how they develop 6e and what you expect?
Core rule for me, Pundit, remove political ideology and ties to the real world game.
Oh yeah, that is absolutely, yeah.
I think that's like the core tenet for me. And you'll get these right fighters or left fighters on the internet. Well, then you're not really playing, man, because there's politics and everything. No, we get that, but I don't need art impersonating Hillary Clinton in my book.
Well, what you don't need is rules or art that are clearly there for propaganda purposes.
Right.
Of course, some games are going to, a cyberpunk game will always be in a sense political, right? But there's a difference between that, hell, the War of the Roses was a political conflict, right? It's just not a contemporary one, right? But there's a difference between that and injecting real world, modern day politics into what is supposed to be a game that is set outside of the real world, right?
Right. I'm waiting for the adventure module to release from either Wizards or Paizo that features an orange-skinned orc named Frumped as the big bad, because we're right up to that line, and that's not anything that we need. I don't give a damn what your politics are, as long as you're a good player at my table, and we can disagree and still be friends. We can vote differently and still play the game together, but don't shove it down my throat through the source materials. My core.
I honestly think that 5.5, part of its failure was because of how over the top it was in its art direction, right? When you have more Black women in those 3 books than there are real Black women playing D&D in the real world, you know that it's gone too far. Right?
Well, and you've got the gay beholder with the child love symbol for its eye.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Was that actually in the 5.5 books though?
I don't know.
There were other ones that definitely were. The Mexican orcs,
right?
The gay dwarves cooking pastry instead of mining.
I believe it was in a supplement, and they used it as promotion online. It was a promotional image.
They did. They certainly used it online. Yeah.
So it's fair game. It's fair game, and that's the kind of stuff that is a non-negotiable. Insert Paul. Tell me about what a bastard Strahd is. Fine. Don't equate it to a real-world parallel.
Well, or if you are going to equate it to a real-world parallel, it better be Dracula, right? It better be Vlad Tepes,
Don't equate it to today's voting booth.
Yeah. So how I would, what I would say is that I would do something that would certainly incorporate some elements of OSR play, right? I would have very clear and niche protected classes, and I would probably only have a small number of classes with rules that would allow you to then advance your character in different ways that would create differences. So no 2 fighters would be alike, rather than inventing 30 character classes.
I was going to say, you're not going to have. I think the official count now is approaching 200 subclasses.
Yeah, and I would have a relatively simple basic mechanical system. I would have a core set of rules that would be set up at a medium level of difficulty, let's say, right? Which one of the errors of 5th edition is that they decided that the default was going to be easy mode, right, and compared to medium mode, right? And I tried to argue against that, but they didn't listen to me in that case. And then in the DMG you can create all kinds of optional variants that you can use to generate your own type of campaign from it. I'd also I don't know, this might be unpopular for some people, but I would probably reduce the number of spells into a workable number instead of having 3,200 spells that of which only maybe at most 80 will ever be used.
I like the idea of skinnable spells for game design, because an acid arrow or a flame bolt, they're effectively the same thing with a different damage type. Does it need to be a different spell, or can it be as the caster describes it? But that's putting a lot of onus on the players, and modern players today are very paint by numbers. If they don't have an outline and a direction, they don't know what to do.
Yeah, but there are ways to do that. You could stat it out in the spell format, right? You could say, well, you can pick which one of these you use, right? And instead of there being 20 different spells that fire some kind of energy at someone, you have one spell and you pick one of the 20 to be the one that you use there, right?
Right.
And I would keep the advantage and disadvantage mechanics. I know that a lot of old school gamers don't particularly care for it, but it was literally like, the killer app that made 5e so popular, right? Because it makes the gameplay flow incredibly quickly.
I was a fan of the on the fly +2 -2, but if you have a dungeon master that's not capable, and we know, look at Thaco, we can't subtract. I mean, no, advantage, disadvantage, I think, was probably the single most revolutionary thing that got codified, because the concept existed prior, but it was codified with 5th edition. I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, I championed it. There was a time when they weren't totally sure they wanted to go that way, or they wanted to do it for only some very specific things. I said, no, this is brilliant. This is exactly, you have to use it for almost everything you can, right?
Right. Because then it's uniform too.
Yeah.
I think again,
that's hugely useful for relatively casual gamers.
Right. Right.
Instead of having to look up pluses and minuses in the book,
Yep.
So I guess that's how we would answer that question. A very interesting question, Jeff. Driving and Dragon has, of course, an opposite opinion. Reprint 3.5 and call it a day. You see, 3rd edition, its big problem was that it was prizing system mastery, right? The guy that read every little feat, every little special ability, every little skill, right? And gamed it out, right? And you would have, it was the only edition I ever played where one of my players came to me at the beginning of the campaign, said, I'm going to play a warrior, and here are all the things I'm going to do when I level him up from level 1 to level 20. He had decided it beforehand. Didn't matter what would happen in the campaign, because these were the mechanically best rules for him to get the type of fighter that he wanted to get. And that would be obviously way better than the fighter that someone who has not read meticulously all of the rules could possibly make, right?
Right. I think 3.5 went off the rails with the bloat. If you were to say, we're going to play a game, welcome to the table, you can use 3.5 core only, fine. I think the skill system could be refined and actually minimized to a level, but I like 3rd edition, generally speaking. Is it my system of choice? I don't know. It's probably in my top 4. So there's always room for improvement, but it fell victim to the same thing that 2nd edition came, all the splat books. If you boil it down to the basics, you have a very solid foundation. But the problem is, once you build it up and out so far, you get those munchkin players that are going to optimize to the world. I don't care what happened in the campaign. I don't care the experience that my character went through. At level 17, I'm going to have this build. And that's really where the term build is now commonplace. And it drives me bonkers because I don't want you to build a character based on the stats and the mechanics. I want you to build the character based on the journey that that character has in your campaign. So you might take a feat or a skill that's not optimal, but is the most logical skill possible because, the RP in TTRPG stands for role-playing.
Yeah. Well, that's why I one of the things I like about OSR games is that as a rule, they don't have social skills.
Right.
You have to role play it. You can sometimes use not social skills, but certain types of knowledge skills that might be able to help you, right? So if you're trying to find a fence in the dingier part of the city and you have the urban lore skill that can help you find the guy, but then you have to role play how you're going to do the negotiation, and then you use the reaction rule system to make it work, right?
Perfect. Makes perfect sense.
And I made a book about that too, which is called Social Encounters, which expands the reaction system into giving you specific guidelines as the DM for how to manage these specific things, like whether you're doing a debate or whether you're at a court case or whether you're haggling with someone, trying to intimidate someone, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very good little book, and you can find it in the description to this video and all my other videos. It says technically it's Social Encounters on the Silk Road, but that's only because it was made while Mad Scribe was publishing Sword and Caravan. You can absolutely use it in any setting context, right? It is in no way the content is in no way specific to the Silk Road setting. Dragons and Dragons. I like this drinking game. All right. So if you guys have any other questions for Ryan or for me, this would be the time to do it. We're at the 2-hour mark now, and which is what Ryan said he was more or less planning to do. So if you guys have something else that you want to talk about or ask, get to it right now. And
while you're doing that, I'm going to take a page out of Pundit's book.
There you go.
Drive-through RPG, Village of Greenhaven.
There you go.
If you need a starter town or just some ideas or some random tables, or you're looking for a base of operations for your campaign, short, sweet, and cheap, this is what I call imagination fodder for your campaign. It is completely system agnostic, which was another, I was told, poor choice, but it panned out okay. It's on its way to being a gold bestseller on Drive-Thru RPG.
Oh, congratulations.
I couldn't be happier with it, but it has everything from NPCs to events and a nicely fleshed out town that you can use for level 1 or level 20 characters, because the details are still coming out from your creativity and your imagination. This is just a crutch, a little helper book, if anything else. Go Drive-Thru RPG, search Greenhaven, find it, buy it, cheap.
And I'm happy for my part that you guys are excited about me making a game in ancient Rome. But while you're waiting, have you considered Vikings?
Aha!
This is the Last Vikings, which is a campaign setting for OSR in general. It's set at the exact same time as my Baptism of Fire setting, so in the early medieval period, and it gives you everything you need to have to play Viking raiders of different kinds. It's kind of focused on the Joms Vikings, which were the last pagan Vikings in the Baltic Sea, but you can use it for any kind of Viking campaign, and it's got legitimate, Norseman magic in it, monsters, magic items. It has rules on traveling by sail, by boats, and it's an excellent product. So check it out. You can get it at Drive-Thru. The link is in my description.
Rick Carson wants to know if Vikings are just Romans with hairy feet.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there's people who like Romans and there's people who like Vikings, and a lot of times those people overlap for various reasons. What led to the fall of the OSR? Everyone played the Pundit drinking game and the OSR died of collective liver failure. All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions here.
Sounds good. I'm going to play the Pundit.
Actually, no one of consequence asks, Pundit, will there be rules for chariot racing in your upcoming Rome-based book? Well, I talk a lot about chariot racing, which was a very, very popular sport in ancient Rome, but I don't actually... There wasn't room to put a set of really proper rules about chariot racing there. That might come out at some point in a supplement. Right? I'm probably going to make supplements for this game. So, you know, there's still a pretty good chance that might happen, you know. So I don't want to give you any false hopes there. The default book will not have specific mechanics for chariot racing. Could you adapt the jousting? Well, I wouldn't say so, because it's a very different thing. With the chariot racing, it's like car racing, right? You're not trying to kill your opponent, not necessarily. Ben-Hur and stuff like that notwithstanding. But, you know, the whole thing is you have to track how effective one is at the race, you know. So I would have to really, I'm sure I could make a set of chariot racing rules, but I would have to think very carefully about how to do that. I wouldn't just use the jousting rules, because those are very different. Those are a kind of dueling rule, and a chariot race is not a duel. It's a contest. Yeah.
Chariot race 100 instead of death race 2000. There you
go. Well, in this case, it would be chariot race 211. Yeah. All right. So I guess we've gotten now to the final question.
Uh-oh.
And this is, I was telling you before, right, that when I started gaming as an 11-year-old, I was the nerdiest kid in the gaming group, because it was full of normies. By the time I was, in high school, I was 16. I was the least nerdy guy at my table, because all of the normies had gone, right? And over time, I've actually become less nerdy as time goes by, because I don't do anything really that is classically nerdy other than playing tabletop RPGs. Right? I don't play video games. I don't watch anime. I don't collect Funko Pops. I don't play weird German board games. I don't read comic books anymore. I don't even read novels. Definitely not serial novels of, Forgotten Realms or Star Trek or something like that. Basically the only, there are things that have now become mainstream. I could say, well, I've watched Marvel movies, but that's not really a nerd thing anymore. It's everybody watches Marvel movies, right? So that doesn't really count. I was a Doctor Who fan, but I can't say that about modern day Doctor Who, right? So in essence, I am remarkably, I'm weird in other ways, right? Because I'm a comparative religion professor and historian, and stuff like that. And I'm into a lot of weird stuff, but none of which would fall under the specific nerd category. So my question to every single guest is, how nerdy are you?
This is a loaded question for me. Nerd Cognito was born out of my coming out party. In fact, it's built into the name. The original name was going to be Nerd Incognito, but that didn't flow off the tongue, because
Nerd Cognito is better. Yeah.
Yeah. For nerds growing up in our era, it was something that you were either punished for or you hid. And I was exceptionally adept at hiding it. And I lived most of my life hiding it. I loved those things. I did read the sci-fi. I do love board games. I do play Dungeons and Dragons. But I can't say that. The school that I went to was incredibly cliquey. I had to stay in the good group, so to speak. They had no clue. My best friend outside of school, the guy that I did game with, the guy that I did hang out with, I had a key to their freaking house in school. And this is one of the biggest regrets that I have personally of my life. In school, I couldn't say hello. I couldn't say, what are we going to do tonight? It was a totally separate world. And that was a horrible thing that I did and I played into. When the show came out, I said, fuck it. This is part of who I am. So if I don't win this prize, I'm okay with it. I don't collect the Funko Pops, but Pundit, you made fun of me for my He-Man figures, right?
Oh my God, yeah. I forgot about that. You collect action figures.
I've got a room full of action figures.
Yeah. You lost. You were doomed from the beginning.
I lost. I've got too many board games. I've got more board games than shelf space. My wife made me buy shelves to get the action figures off the floor and the furniture so that they could go on the wall. I'm going to lose this fight, so Dan is safe.
I should have seen that coming. And I mean, all right, so you definitely, I think you're probably with that He-Man action figure mission, you are at the lowest place now. You're the furthest away from winning the prize.
But if I need to go to a shareholders meeting or hold a conference call, nobody's going to know. Yeah, so it's this weird dichotomy that I have.
So you still, you're being true to Nerd Cognito, I guess. Yeah. So that I guess mitigates it. But otherwise, that was a terrible disappointment. Driving and Dragons continues to be the undefeated champion.
And he's just embarrassed that I look better in the dress than he does. So
Driving and Dragons says, is it lower than model trains? Well, that's a tough one because model trains, at the very least, they have this like old-timey quality to them, right? Like a lot of people's dads in the 1950s had model train sets, right? And so it was something that in bygone years was seen as an acceptable hobby for a normal adult man to have within certain degrees, right? Of course, some people went nuts about it, right? But it has that cachet of being a very classic thing, right? Whereas collecting action figures when you're any age past 13 is still not. It's never going to be that, right? Nobody's ever going to say, well, in the good old days, my pops, he collected every single one of the My Little Pony collection. No, that's never going to look good, right?
So I'm not going to tell you the count on the He-Man. I'm going to save face right now. I will say that over the next 2 months, I'm expecting 10 more to come in.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I know. I got to curb that now. I'm on retirement money, so.
Ben Shapiro got himself into a bit of trouble when he said that retiring is generally a bad idea, right? And I understand there are lots of people who have jobs that they would really want to retire from, right? But I happen to be on the, Ben Shapiro gets to say that because, of course, he loves what he does, right? And I'm exactly the same way, right? Listen, because my job is making RPGs. My retirement is going to be when they drag me out in a coffin. That's it. So, or until I become so non-compos-menti that I can't do it anymore, I guess. But hopefully, I'd prefer the first to the second.
Mine was different, and I'm still full-time for Nerd Cognito and for our hobby, right? Because I don't view that as a job. I did that in addition. I don't have to put on the face and go to the shareholder meeting anymore, that sort of stuff. So it's a blessing and a curse.
There are some people that say, right, if you turn what you love into a job, it's going to go terribly wrong or something like that. That has not been my experience. I gotta tell you, I had never thought I would be able to turn it into a job, but as it became one, and I realized that it was really going to be it, it's been a pleasure, right? Because I've just kept making all the stuff I love to make, and people want to publish it, and then other people want to buy it, and I'm super grateful to the people who published me and to the people that are buying the books. And when it's, as far as I can see, there are very little downsides to it, right? When you're doing a job that you love, as Surly, exactly, great minds think alike. You'll never work another day in your life. I wake up every morning amazed that this is how I live.
I'm just glad that I can. You hear the stories of people. Oh, I retired and I went crazy.
Yeah, you're not particularly old, right? Come on.
Oh, but I present much younger.
Did you dye your hair or something?
I don't. Thank goodness. I still have all of my hair and the beautiful colors in the locks.
Well, Gen Xers, for some reason, we age weirdly, right?
Yeah.
It's strange, right? Like, I mean, I know I've got the white goatee here and everything, but like, you look at someone, the first Doctor, William Hartnell, right? When he became Doctor Who, he was 54 years old. You look at that guy and you're like, holy shit, right? Like, that's what a 54-year-old looked like in 1963, right?
Right. And as a child born in the 70s and having my formative years in the 80s, I look back at some of the pop media from that decade, and boy, was it weird, because we were in this weird aging pattern where we were born, we were children, and then we didn't physiologically become teenagers. We physiologically became 30-year-old men. And then we stayed 30-year-old men until we became senior citizens.
So, absolutely true.
I'm holding on to it. I'll never tell, but no,
Fair enough.
present much younger than I look, and it doesn't help. My wife is significantly younger than me, so that helps, because if we go to the casino, we get carded not because of me. So
no, that's nice.
Yeah.
So Dying Breed says, your former comrade Grim Jim once said, if you do what you love, you'll never work another day in your life. However, you will never stop working. I guess technically that's true, but it doesn't feel like work, except to people like Grim Jim, who are well-known socialists, and his dream is to be paid universal basic income, so he never has to work again. That's it's easy for a laborite to say that, because they think work is somehow bad rather than the purpose of man in his life. No,
and you still do it, right? It's not, I retired for two reasons. One, I was financially able to do so, and two, I don't talk about it often, but I have multiple sclerosis. It's been degenerating pretty hardcore over the last 2 years. There were days where I would drag myself into the office and barely be able to walk. I am healthier, happier, but I still have a calendar. I still have a schedule. Tomorrow's Monday. What does that mean? That means that I'm going to be editing and producing on Monday. Tuesday, I'm Mr. Mom now at home. I cook, I take care of the house, I run the finances. Mm-hmm. It's still regimented. So I have a job. It's just changed. And it allowed me to get things like Magister, which I talked about earlier, the map builder, off of draft stage and out of a Word document and into layout. So
that's great.
Yeah. It was a big positive. When it comes out, I'll send you a copy.
Yeah, but I do believe that the worst thing a person can do is to retire and then say, well, now I'm going to do nothing, right? Because
I couldn't do that.
That is not a good option. You should always have a plan of what you're actually going to do, because otherwise you waste away, right? Like
we were talking about
purpose.
Yeah, we were talking about it last week. When I retired, I made it a goal to get Twitter monetization, which is no small feat if you have less than 15,000 followers. And it was a grind. I set a schedule. We got there. It's little stuff like that, but it keeps you going, and it's, again, doing the things that we like. So whatever. I'm happy. I'm content. The haters, you know, they're going to continue to hate. And I'm going to say, keep on working, because I can do what I want and have fun doing it and still keep busy and still keep active and still be a positive influence, generally speaking, despite what you read on the internet in this hobby. So I Hate Ryan David might be a little bit of a gimmick.
You don't say. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out Nerd Cognito if you haven't seen it until now. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you were brought here by Ryan, and check out my videos and check out my products. And I hope that we'll see you guys in 4 weeks. We will do the next episode of the RPG Pundit Encounter. And on that high note of Ryan's little chat about retirement, which is, I think that was quite good. And on the terrible disappointment of his He-Man collection, this is where we come to an end, guys. Currently smoking oversized Lorenzetti plus Argento Roots. Take care, everyone. Oh, $20 for the Domino Fund from No One of Consequence. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That is great. Domino will thank you also. We'll keep her in high-protein foods. And there we go. And someone wants a full breakdown on the next Ints as a dump stat from Daniel. Okay, guys. We will see you soon. Take care. Thank you very much once again.